The most important part of our routine is the entrance.
Yes, absolutely. Frank, what the hell are you doing, man?
That's my character. I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage. And then I pick up the trash can and I smash the guy on the head.
Oh, that's gonna be a disaster.
Hey everybody, it's Ty with the Fro, and I have created a monster. I just got back from locals where I completed a perfect tournament, 4-0 in matches, 8-0 in games, with a brand new brew. I wanted to build Dredge in Digimon, and suffice to say, I have succeeded. It's probably the most disgusting deck I've built in quite some time, because it largely operates on getting as many free effects as possible, and that is all made possible with the new EX2 package of Impmon, Beelzemon, Death Slinger, and Dobermon. These are all free effects that can keep playing out of our trash. It's very reminiscent of Legacy Dredge, so you have effects like, say, Narcomoeba that can put themselves into play for free, not unlike Beelzemon with an Impmon. We have effects that constantly trash ourselves, so we can keep the chain going. We've got effects that gain us memory. We've got Dobermon for recursion. So the ultimate question is, how do we abuse this package? And the answer is Beelstarmon. This is a deck that's been floating around since BT6. It's been a very powerful archetype, but most importantly, it wants to mill ourselves as much as possible. We want to fill up our trash. And thanks to this new package, this is the easiest time to possibly do that. I played this deck in a dominating performance against Machinedramon, Eosmon, a Beelstarmon mirror match, and Mastamon, which is one of the scarier decks in the format right now. So let's break down the deck and see just what makes the deck so scary. First off, we've got our eggs. We've got 4 copies of the starter deck Pogumon. On deletion, we trash 2 cards from our deck. It's very simple, very straightforward. I'm not running any Demi-Mirrormons because we trash our Digimon from on deletion. I don't want to be drawing cards, I just want to be milling them into our trash. I've noticed that every time I trash one of my cards, Demi-Mirrormon with the deck, I would always draw into effects that would be better off staying on top of my deck. So if I end up drawing, like, say, a Beelzemon, it doesn't really do anything. It's actually detrimental, so I found, when in doubt, just stick with the most consistent option here. Next up for our rookies, we've got 4 copies of the new EX2 Impmon, the classic BT2 Impmon, and BT6 Impmon. This is a very important card for maintaining our trashing, because when you trash it from the top of your deck through an effect that isn't an EX2 Impmon, you trash 3 more cards. So for something like, say, the Pogumon's deletion effect, if you hit one of these things, you're flipping over 3 extra cards on top of the 2 you would normally be trashing, and that really accelerates how quickly we're able to fill our trash pile. Most importantly, the Impmon from BT2, just on deletion, you trash the top 3 cards of your deck. It's a very straightforward effect. There are often times where you swing in with this on your second turn, and you hit, say, 3 7-cost options, shaving your Beelstarmon down to a 9-cost right off the bat. It's just a very versatile card. It's one of those things that you just always want to just send into the meat grinder. You just want to keep deleting this thing over and over again. Lastly, with the rookies, we've got BT6 Impmon. This is kind of our Beelstarmons 5 through 8. What's also worth noting with this Impmon in particular is, because it's an on-play effect, it will still work with the new Beelzemon. So if we bring this back, we can immediately trash a card from our hand, get a Beelstarmon back, and even through just randomly milling ourselves, we can get a bunch of free value. We don't even have to spend any extra memory just by playing this thing. We can just get it for free. So next up we've got our level 4s, which is a very sparse package. We're only running 5 level 4s in total. We've got 4 copies of Dobermon and 1 Ginkakumon promote. The Dobermon is probably the best card in this deck for recursion, because on deletion we trash 3 more cards, and we get to return any purple Digimon or purple Tamer back from our trash to our hands. So if Impmon was Beelstarmon's 5 through 8, this is Beelstarmon's 9 through 12. The Ginkakumon promote, I just like having it in there as a potential rush option, just to get those last couple of checks in. And most importantly, if our deck starts getting a little too low, we can always just Digivolve this on top of a Dobermon or BT2 Impmon, and that way when this deletes, we don't end up milling 3 cards. So if we get down to like our last, say, 5 cards in the deck, this is a pretty good way to safely continue being aggressive while not decking ourselves out. So we're not running any level 5s in this deck because we want to skip directly to Beelstarmon. We have no plans of ever Digivolving into her, because why Digivolve when we can drop her down to 1 memory, 2 memory cost, sometimes even free with this deck, because of how aggressively and how quickly we can fill our trash. So on play, we return any option with a memory cost of 7 from our trash to our hand. Then we get to play an option with memory cost 7 without paying its memory cost. This can do anything from just kill spell, sweep the board. Nail Bone is very good for just bringing back 2 more bodies. So Beelstarmon is just kind of the linchpin of the deck. It gives us all the flexibility, it gives us all of the board control, and it's also a very good tool for just keeping the board stocked with bodies. This is a very aggressive deck that we want to be playing, so Beelstarmon getting back 2 more bodies with Nailbone is a very useful tool for making sure that our opponent is staying on the back foot, because we can even play Beelstarmon for like 2 memory, go Wall Schwarmer and wipe the board, and then play another Beelstarmon again for 2 more memory, and Nailbone get 2 more bodies. Then we've got 4 things in play that our opponents have to deal with immediately, because you run the risk of just wiping them out with the game. Okay, and then we've got 4 copies of Beelzemon. We pretty much never have this thing in play. We only want this thing in our decks that we can trash it. Because when it's trashed from the top of our deck, we can return any Impmon from the trash to the battlefield without paying its memory cost. So this is kind of like our version of Narcomoeba in the deck. So we can play this, we're basically getting free things for just for having this in our deck. It's just a very good way of keeping things in play, keeping bodies in play. Most importantly with this is we can even do this effect on our opponent's turn. So if they have a deletion effect for, say, Dobermon, and we trash one of this, we can get that Impmon back into play on their turn, so that we don't have to stick around, we don't have to wait for our Impmons to attack, we can just start going forward. And rounding out the Digimon package, we've got 2 copies of Beelzemon Blast Mode. We pretty much never have this thing in play. Like 6 is a lot of memory to Digivolve into. But most importantly with this thing is that when it's trashed from our deck, we get to delete one of our opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon for free. Save our memory for any of our more important kill spells or any more flexible kill spells. We can use this to pop a rookie or pop a level 4, and then Happy Bullet showering away something bigger. In a pinch, I have tried Digivolving this onto a Beelstarmon, like playing Beelstarmon for like 1, then Digivolving into this, deleting our opponent's biggest thing. But the biggest thing with this is, it's really not that common. 9 times out of 10, I just want to keep this thing in my deck so that I can just get that free removal. Ultimately down the line, this could end up being like 2 copies of Zwart Defeat, because those Digivolve for half the cost, but so far I've been liking having the free deletion effect, and it's been very powerful. So for our 7-cost options, we've got a fairly standard Beelstarmon package. We've got all of our removal options, like Fly Bull is just a very straightforward kill any level 6 or lower Digimon. Trump Sword kills any unsuspended Digimon, which isn't as good in security unless you're facing one of those Digimon that unsuspend once you attack. Something like, say, Reaper out of the Mother D Reaper deck, which is one of the only kill spells that actually interacts with that card. Very good against Gabu Bond, fairly rare instances where somebody's still playing that. But it's just a very effective, like, your opponent attacks in, flips this, you pop something else, and it just decreases the amount of security checks they get to do during their turn. Gwal Shawarma is just a very powerful board wipe, just deletes everything with a play cost 7 or less, so we get to play Beelstarmon, keep that in play, clear the board of everything else. Everything in our deck that costs 7 or less, we don't really care if it dies. Like, Dobermon, we want it to die, Impmons, we want it to die. And especially because there's so many ways of getting them back into play, like, almost right away. Gwal Shawarma can basically rip our opponent's board apart, and we can usually get at least like 1 or 2 bodies back into play in the same turn, so it's basically no loss of tempo whatsoever on our end, and all tempo loss on our opponent's side. Happy Bowl of Showering is a little bit less flexible of a board wipe option. There aren't too many decks that focus on having the same DP across the board. It's pretty good for picking off like multiple rookies, multiple, say, Eosmon or Searcher from the Mother D Reaper deck, so that really slows them down that way. The reason I'm not running 3 Gwal Shawarmas is because this will actually activate out of security, whereas this would just go to my hand. So it gives it a little bit of extra play there. So I do like the ratio of 2 and 1. I probably wouldn't switch that or change the go 3 and 0. Lastly, we've got 4 copies of Nailbone. I know a lot of more traditional Beelstarmon decks typically run like 2, maybe like even 1 copy of Nailbone. This is kind of our best option for keeping a board presence. Because anytime we play Nailbone, we're getting a Dobermon and an Impmon back into play for free. This is probably one of the better effects for churning bodies out onto our opponent's turn, because we flip this in security, we get that Dobermon back right away. If we play this off of a Beelstarmon, we've got 3 bodies in play right away, and this deck is very centered on recurring its trash pile. So having Beelstarmon play Nailbone, it makes it so that like you can get that swarm on the board very quickly. Like there have been turns I've had where I would Digivolve BT2 Impmon onto Pagumon, check in, mill 5 cards, and then Beelstarmon for Nailbone, get an Impmon and a Dobermon back. And on turn 2, I've got 3 things in play, one of which is level 6, 2 of which I don't care if they die. So it's a very good way of pressuring our opponents. Next up, rounding out the option package, we've got 4 copies of the new Death Slinger card and 3 copies of Darkness Wave. Death Slinger is a very versatile removal spell, because for only 4 memory, we get just to pop any level 4 or lower Digimon, and for every 10 cards in our trash, that effect scales by 1 level. So this is one of the few options that Beelstarmon has access to that can actually hit a level 7. Having 30 cards in our trash is very common. So if we hit that in security, we can pop his Word Defeat. We can hit pretty much any level 7 that we care about. We get to hit pretty much any Digimon that could possibly be a threat. And more importantly, because it only costs 4 memory, it gives us a little bit of flexibility in terms of how much we're able to play. We're not stuck on 7 cost options like typical Beelstarmon decks are. As well, when this is trashed, we gain 1 memory. So there are some times where we can trash effects on our opponent's turn, like if they kill off an Impmon, and we flip this and we just choke them on memory that they weren't anticipating. Sometimes if they're on 0, we can just take over the turn. But more importantly, if we flip one of these, it's actually memory neutral. On the surface, Darkness Wave, it's just 1 memory, mill 3 cards because we're not running any yellow Digimon, so we don't get to get anything back from our hands. So it doesn't really do much beyond that. However, that is also the best thing about this card, is that it only costs 1 memory. For 1 memory, we can play this on our first turn, mill 3 cards. If we hit 3 7-cost options, we can reduce the cost of Beelstarmon by 3. If we flip over into any of the effects that trigger off of trashing, we get to do those for as early as the first turn. Like if we hit a Beelzemon and an Impmon, then we get that Impmon into play on the first turn as well as this, and our opponent is stuck on 1 memory for their turn. So it's a very good choking tool as well. This is another one of those effects that is extra powerful in security because of all the different things that we can potentially hit when we trash. So if our opponent hits this, we could possibly flip over a Beelzemon, get a body back, a Beelzemon blast mode, destroy one of their other attackers. We can hit an Impmon and just chain through our deck. So it's a very flexible, very versatile card for the memory cost. Lastly, just to round it out, we've got 2 copies of Matt. Honestly, it didn't really do too much tonight. I didn't really see it too often, but when I did see it, it was actually very strong. This is 2 more copies of Beelstarmon, let's be real. Because on play, we get any purple Digimon or purple option from our trash to our hand, so we can grab Darkness Wave if we need to, but more often than not, this is going to be another Beelstarmon. So between 4 copies of Beelstarmon, 4 Impmon BT6, 4 Dobermon, 4 Beelzemon, bringing back Impmon BT6, and this, we're running like 18 copies of Beelstarmon, which is far and above any other Beelstarmon deck. So we have access to so many copies of it that it's very good at enabling just grinding out our opponent. And at worst, it's also just a memory setter. Like, end of the day, memory setters are always just good to have, but I wouldn't play any more than 2. This could very well be 2 copies of Mimi, if we really felt like getting more memory out of the options, but so far this has been fairly okay. No complaints so far, so it's definitely something that, like, if I had to cut 2 cards, it would probably be these 2. But for now, still solid. So yeah, overall, this deck is an absolute monstrosity. There have been turns where I have played Pogumon, Impmon, Digivolve, play another Impmon, and then on my opponent's turn, I swing in with 2 Impmons and milled like 8 cards. And if I hit anything beyond that, like anything off of that, if I hit any Beelzemon, those Impmons are coming back. If I hit any 7-cost options, that Beelstarmon is coming down faster. The speed at which this deck goes, it's blistering. Like, I played against the Machine Dramon deck round 1, and I had him dead on board by turn 3. Because I just had body, punch, play more things, get those bodies back into play. And on turn 2, turn 3, I had 4 things in play, and my opponent had 1 blocker. So, how do you even face up with that? Like, the Beelstarmon matchup I faced, it was very back and forth, but at the end of the day, he only had access to 8 copies of Beelstarmon. He had 4 Beelstarmons and 4 Impmons. I had 18, so I just ground him to dust. Biggest thing is also, he was on Eisbon Scatter Mode instead of Dobermon. So Scatter Mode is one of the big things that, like, you see a purple deck without it running and you're going, oh, what's going on here? So I'm not running Scatter Mode solely because I don't want to draw my deck. I want to trash it. Even if I have options stuck in my hand, because I'm getting so many free effects, I can play those options from my hand and for full value, for 7 memory, and I've still got all this extra stuff that I did every turn. So it's not the end of the world if I pass my opponent with, say, like 4 or 5 memory, because I did like 12 memories worth of things on top of that. Scatter mode to me in this deck just doesn't make sense, because if we draw Beelzemon, it's a dead draw. If we draw Impmon, it's a dead draw. Like, we don't want to have these cards in our hand at any point. We just want to keep those in the deck. So the amount of draw power in this deck is very limited, but the amount of mill power is accelerated. You'll even notice that I'm not even running that many possible Digivolutions, because every time I draw one of those cards off Digivolving, I run the risk of drawing into a Beelzemon, which I don't want to do. So, in a sense, that is very reminiscent of Legacy Dredge, where we don't want to actually draw any of our dredgers. We want to just keep milling those into the graveyard. So this played out very, very close to what I normally play in Magic, and upon reflection, not having a hindrance like, say, lands or mana holding you back in a game like Digimon makes all of these free effects that more disgusting. So that is a big reason of why this deck was so effective. Like, if my opponent's playing Mastermon and I just keep picking off their Gatomon, eventually they're going to get to a point where they're just going to slam down Anjouamon or Magna Anjouamon for full value, and just gives me all the memory, and I'm able to convert that into milling myself, Beelstarmon, wipe the board, Beelstarmon, Nailbone, you have no board, I have 4 things in play, good game. Like, decks aren't running the amount of removal they should be, so constantly going wide is a lot more effective than just going tall, because even against something like, say, the big Gallantmon deck, which is super popular right now, they build up into the Gallantmon, we just fly bullet them for free. Like, they spend all these resources building up a thing, killing off our Digimon, we don't care. Like, even if they kill off the Beelstarmon, we get it back so easily and so frequently that it doesn't matter. Like, there have been times where I've gotten fully board wiped, then I just pick off their thing that they've invested all their time and energy into, and then I just build my board back up again. And by the time they've built up even halfway to, say, level 5, then I have still 3 things in play, and I'm still checking security constantly. So my opponents didn't really have much breathing room. So that was like the biggest reason why this deck was so successful tonight. It's like, you put your opponent on the back foot so early, and you just keep them there. So yeah, this deck has been absolutely disgusting. I'm super happy with how it played out. So if you want to see just more gross brews and Digimon content, be sure to hit like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all that YouTube stuff. And this has been Tyler the Fro signing off. Have a great night.